And the first thing that we want to look at is the impact of AI and what that is actually doing in the sales funnel. So if I put this slide up, sales funnel. And yeah, it makes sense. It's kind of a very simple way of looking at how to communicate with your consumer. You can't start pushing loyalty messages to someone that doesn't even know who you are. You've got to kind of take them on a journey. You've got to there's a different strategy to build awareness. There's a different strategy to engage them and get them interested in your products. How do you get them to start considering you before you can go to purchase intent and sales? And then there's the whole CRM strategy to build loyalty. But it is a very simple view, and I think it is changing a lot, and we have to look at it in a bit of a different way. For instance, Facebook. Facebook, to me, covers every single layer of that funnel. You can use video for conversions. You can use video for loyalty. Search, sure, search is very much at the bottom end of the funnel, but is it really just a conversion tool? Search also drives awareness. Search also plays a very important role up at the top of the funnel. And yeah, I mean, and you always get those clients who come to you and they go, and a lot of clients I find, I don't know if people can relate to this, are very focused on the bottom of the funnel type channels, like conversion optimized campaigns, search campaigns. And because this is a relatively big week in terms of rugby, I always bring it down to a rugby analogy where it's like saying, if a client says, all of our sales are coming from search, let's spend all of our money on search, I turn around and go, well, that's like being a rugby coach and saying, let's drop our props and our hooker because they don't score tries, and let's bring on two more fly halves, two more wings and a fly half, and surely we'll get more tries. I mean, I'm making an assumption that Billy LaRue isn't amongst that mix. Sorry, that was a bit offsides. But essentially, you've got to do the upfront work. You need the players up front to drive that, and that's really building that awareness and building that brand. But going back to the point that the reason I feel that this funnel is maybe overused and oversimplified is people are complicated. There's a whole lot of things going on in a person's mind when they make a purchase decision. And it's really, really difficult to tap into each of those things because there's a rational mind, there's an emotional mind, and every single person in this room is very different in terms of how they engage. And we have to find a way to tap into that. And I'd go, even as short a while ago as 2 years, that was really difficult to do. But today it's not that hard. AI actually allows us to be a lot more targeted and a lot more personalized. So if you just put exposure out there, generic exposure, there's no way that you can resonate with every single person because everyone is different. And sure, that doesn't mean throw the funnel out. You still got to think about it that way. But how do you actually build through all of that clutter going on in different people's minds and get to a conversion? How do you navigate the rational versus the emotional? So what we do is we talk about triggers. And everything must be dynamic and must be automated. Because there is no way as a marketer that you can come up with enough messages and enough target audiences for each of those messages for each of those target audiences to actually effectively speak to everyone. But with AI and with smart bidding tools, it actually becomes possible to break through all of that and put the right message in front of the right person at the right time. And it's getting more and more easy, which I'll get into a little bit more later, but a lot of agencies are going, geez, are we becoming obsolete? Because there's actually machines that are almost doing a lot of what we've been doing in the past. So what we also talk about a lot is looking at triggers. And I was down at a Google conference recently, and they actually did some interesting research, which I thought I'd just, on a very high level, I don't have the exact stats, just share with you, but the key thing is to get the points out of it. They took a sample of 2,000 online shoppers in a virtual shopping environment. They took 2 product verticals, one was cell phones and the other was mortgages. And they pushed certain triggered messages to people. First, what they did is they got them to identify their first choice brand and then their second choice brand. And then by pushing a lot of triggers, they were able to shift people from their first choice brand to their second choice brand. On something like mobile, it was a lot harder. They could only shift 29% of people because when it comes to cell phones and things like that, people are very emotional. They're very like, I want an iPhone over a Samsung. But there isn't really a real reason for that except for a brand affinity or brand connection. But something like mortgages, what they actually did was they made up a company. It doesn't even exist. A mortgage company. And they were able to shift 67% of people from their first choice mortgage brand to a mortgage brand that they totally made up. And they played on various things. First of, more exposure. How do you actually get your message out more and more and more frequency? And they found that actually didn't have such a big impact. You can keep pushing the message, but people tend to stick to their first brand. Then you play on things like scarcity. Limited stock, get it now, those type of messaging. And that kind of had a bit of an impact, but not so huge on either side. Social norms played a really big role when it came to the cell phone side versus what's cool and trying to get people on a more of an emotional side to connect with the second brand over the first brand. Not such a big effect on the other side. Authority bias was huge for the mortgage side, not so much for the cell phone side. But what's interesting is looking at the power of free. For the mortgage company that doesn't exist, they offered everyone $500 of cash back as they sign up for a mortgage. That's $500 in your pocket sign up. And when you think about it, the value of a mortgage over 20 years or however long it takes you to pay it off is way more than $500 to that particular mortgage provider. So it's already a small thing to give, but that actually had the biggest shift. And that's actually what pushed people, I'll take this brand even though I've never heard of it, if they're going to give me $500. And then the other big thing is the power of now, giving offers that expire. And all of these things played a role. And the thing as marketers, we've got to actually realize different triggers are going to play different roles for different products. But we've got to constantly test and tap into these different emotions and the different ways that people think about things. So for me, the funnel looks different. It's not just a straight funnel that everyone moves through from an awareness. And I don't think you can just come up with one awareness strategy, because some people are impulsive. They will just buy as they see something. Some people won't. Obviously, bigger purchase decisions will take longer for people to move through. But yeah, so I mean, for me, you've got to look at it differently. You've got to go from a trigger to a conversion. There's all that exposure that you put out there, but then you've got to think about people exploring and people evaluating. And how do you tap into those, what we call biases? The biases that will drive someone over one brand to another brand. Okay, so this is something I'm sure you've heard a lot, especially probably on this conference even, the whole concept of machine learning and smart bidding. If we look at time, and in the digital world, time is not very long. 5 years is like another century ago in any other industry. People very much looked at a last click process. All my sales came from search, all my sales came from a Facebook conversion optimized ad, and they did a very manual process. You'd work out, with this keyword, I have a conversion rate of this. So if I want to get my cost per acquisition under 100 Rand, and the conversion rate's 10%, I can't pay more than 10 Rand a click. And it was a very manual thing. But nowadays, that's changing. And we're getting to very much a data-driven world, and very much a smart bidding world, where you can actually say, I want 100 Rand conversion. Google and various other platforms will auto-optimize that for you to make sure that you get to the conversion point you want, or the return on ad spend that you want. And it's very much an automated process. And that's something that a lot of agencies, and this came across as well at the Google event, are actually very nervous of, because it's like, well, what value are we adding? And the value of the agencies is very much to think about the technology, think about the setup, the platform, the integration, and make sure that everything is seamless and works properly. It's a lot less manual. But yeah, so this is actually, I just took this photo from the event because it actually highlights to me what's really important. Because Google, obviously being one of the biggest players in the digital space, this is a slide that shows everything they see coming over the next year. All of these things speak to smart bidding and smart optimization. So universal app campaigns, they've always been app campaigns. Now they just call them app campaigns. But it used to be that you had certain metrics that you could target your audiences on based on demographics, geography, past behavior, things like that. They now have thousands of indicators that actually tell you who are the people to put this app install ad in front of. And that's totally automated. Smart shopping is getting a lot smarter and a lot better. I'm not going to elaborate on all of these things because I think a lot of them have been around, they've just got better. I will go into discovery campaigns because that I think is really exciting and really new. And then obviously local campaigns. There's a lot of options out there with, it's not just Google. Facebook's very effective at it. Vicinity owns Waze, they're great at it. I saw a new product the other day, very advanced in terms of pinpointing ads to people in exact locations being tap. And there's more and more players coming in this space, and it is quite a growing space. So, but basically, I'm just going to, for the sake of this example, focus on Google. This does apply across a lot of data management platforms and across social media platforms. But if you think about it, Google has all of these platforms. And so Facebook has WhatsApp and Instagram, but across all these platforms, there's 1 billion users, and they're all doing stuff. So by doing stuff, they're actually picking up what they call intent signals. And it's getting more and more advanced in terms of how people are engaging and what they're doing and what messages to show them. It's actually getting a little scary in terms of how advanced it is. So for example, the other day I bought a camera as a birthday present for my wife. I know nothing about cameras. I didn't even know where to start searching, so I didn't even go online. I thought I'm going to do it old school and walked into a shop and spoke to a sales agent. And they took me through all the options, they gave them a budget, and they sold me a camera. I walked out, I went onto Facebook, and it was actually, funny enough, one of my clients' ads popped up, a retail client, for a camera. And I was like, geez, we must be clever to do this, but we didn't actually do anything. All we did is auto-optimize based on behavior and built a feed that pulled all their products into Facebook to customize the ad to me. So I don't know how Facebook knew that. I honestly still don't, okay? But they say they don't listen to your conversations or what you're doing, but they knew. It was literally within 2 hours. And I had a similar experience when I upgraded my cell phone the other day. I started seeing cell phone ads as I walked out the store. And that wasn't an online experience. But the point is that nowadays, creative needs to match the experiences. And you can do that, and the technology's there and it's possible. Then the big thing is, how do you attribute that? So if you take the example, I heard a great analogy the other day. A guy gets married, but he met his wife on Tinder. So he looks back and he reflects back on meeting her and looks at the journey that took him to get to that wedding day. And they did the swipe thing and everything on Tinder. They went on a date. They went to Billy's. The date was okay, not brilliant, but good enough to maybe have another date. So he stepped it up, took her to a nice restaurant, and he started the process of kind of winning her over. Then they went on a really amazing holiday together because now things have evolved to that level. And that's where they really connected, fell in love. Then he went to a jewelry shop, bought a ring, got engaged, and got married. So where do you give the credit? If it weren't for Tinder, would they ever have met? If it weren't for that holiday where they fell in love, would they ever have fallen in love? So you've got to actually understand the whole journey. And the same thing applies when you're actually buying something or selling. So it's taking people on that journey and understanding that whole attribution path, because there's so many things involved in terms of that process. And you can't just look at Google Analytics and last click. Sure, we can build in cookie windows on conversion tags, but there's a lot of crossover and duplication in terms of who do we give that credit to, regardless of the click windows and things like that. So you've got to actually start doing an integrated strategy. You've got to go beyond Google Analytics. You've got to look at maybe upgrading to Analytics 360, building in an ad server, integrating everything with your DMP, with DoubleClick or DV360. All of the examples I'm giving now are Google-owned platforms, which means all your eggs are going into the Google basket. And they then know everything. But that's another debate and whether you want to do that. But that does give you an integrated picture in terms of where the whole attribution path and how it works. The other thing is really frustrating, and if you're in an agency, you've probably experienced this, is when clients come to you and they say, this is our target market, target our ads to these people. The other day we had an example of a client coming and they sell a cleaning product. And they said, and it was actually a European targeted campaign, and they said, we only want to target mothers. And not only mothers, we want to target mothers on these sites. And they gave us a site list, which we were able to get through our DoubleClick platform. And we're like, why these sites? You can actually target mothers, assuming that mothers are even your target market, on any site, because the platform knows, based on people's behavior, whether they're a mother or not. But they were adamant, and we convinced them, just give us 10% of your budget to do it our way, and the other 90% will do it your way. That 10% of the budget, where we auto-optimized based on tag data on who's actually interested in the product, delivered 90% of the traffic onto their site from 10% of the budget. Their campaign, which we said up front, literally delivered nothing. It was just way too targeted and way too manual and way too old school. So you've actually got to think differently and just trust the machine. which is a scary thing to say, but that's really where it's going. Yeah, so obviously we talked about the whole process. Within smart campaigns, there are a lot of intent signals. I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with a lot of these. And if anyone wants to ask questions, just feel free to stop me and ask. But tags sit across all the sites that you go on. And these sites are gathering behavior, but also on your own sites. It's looking at how much time you're spending on the site, what pages are you looking at, what are you actually doing on the site, are people bouncing, are they dropping off? And then it's looking at who's buying, what are they buying, and building in all that e-commerce data. Then the big thing is taking that CRM data from a platform like Salesforce, feeding it back into the platform, that then gives you an idea of what are their offline behavior, who's actually going into the store, who's actually converting via the call center. Feeding all that back in, and it's an ongoing customization. And then, obviously, shopping cart behavior and the sources of traffic coming into your site. All of these things create intense signals, and it's constantly building up data and getting smarter. Just a quick example, in terms of setting up a smart display campaign, you can create multiple headlines, you can create multiple descriptions and images, and then just let the platform decide what to show, what to who. I'm sure you've all had that experience where you're searching for a hotel in Cape Town, and suddenly, every single ad you see is not just for hotels, but specifically for where you're going and what you're wanting to do. And that technology, it seems like whoever's doing the marketing for the bookings.com of the world are really advanced and really clever, but they're actually not. They've just done it right, and it's not that hard, anyone can do it. You just need to build the right feeds that pulls the data into the platforms, and it'll also optimize. The back end, the machine does it all for you. And then this is, looking at the funnel approach again. People come into your site, they're all over the place. You've got to order those people into neat rows. The orange people are interested in this, where the black people are interested in something else, the green in something else, and the blue in something else. Group those people and then drive them to a personalized experience. So it is about building those smart lists and it's not just about letting the machine do everything. So for instance, we sat down with a client recently, and they were getting really granular. They'd analyzed their audiences and their customers as a financial service client, and telling us what messages to show what people. And I said to them, you don't have to overdo it like this. Just let it work, let it run for you, or to optimize. But I was talking to an analyst in their business intelligence division, and the guy basically looked at me like that I was pretty much telling him his job's obsolete, and which it's not. And I realized I maybe overstepped the mark. You do have to analyze your customers. You do have to analyze, especially in the financial service, understand the risk profiles of the different people and what messages to push to them. But you don't have to push that too much into your media. There are ways. Obviously, you want to create lists of different audiences, especially if some people are, from a loans perspective, very high risk versus non-high risk. You want to exclude certain people, but you don't want to spend too much time over-analyzing it. So yeah, I said with the things coming from Google, of all the things, the one thing I'd elaborate a bit more on are discovery campaigns. Is anyone familiar with this? Okay. So Google is very much an intent-driven platform. What happens is you go to Google and you tell Google what you want, and then Google pushes that back to you. Facebook, on the other hand, pushes stuff to you. A lot of it coming from your friends and what they like and what they behave, and it's pushing things to you. But if you think about your Facebook feed, a lot of it these days is news, various news sources, things you follow. If you're into rugby, you're probably going to see a lot of rugby stuff happening at the moment. Depending on the type of politics you follow, you're going to see a lot of that coming. So it's not all about your friends. And Google's realized this, and they've actually created within the Google app a discovery feed that's going to start pushing content to you, just like Facebook. They're not waiting for you to come to them and tell it what you want. It's actually going to help you discover stuff that you don't know about or not thinking about, but it knows that you want based on your behavior. So it's pushing stuff to you all the time, and that's flipping it around. And what that then does is it gives Google a lot more information, and those feed ads, they can now push out onto Gmail as more of a native format rather than your standard banner type things, and it's a very big thing in YouTube as well, where they're going to push discovery type ads. So that just shows where it's moving, and Google is not just relying on people coming to them and telling them what it wants, and it's actually a discovery thing, and that just shows how much they know about you. that they can actually tell you things that you want before you even know you want it. So a big thing, and I know this was touched on in one of the presentations yesterday, but for me, I think it's the hugest missed opportunity in South Africa, is the concept of offline to online. There is obviously, consumers want the importance to be able to touch and feel and go into a shop and buy things, but they also want convenience of being able to shop anywhere, anytime, and having it delivered. And we all know online shopping is growing massively, but people still go in store. And there's a huge missed opportunity, because what's happening is, globally, there's the Hema stores by Alibaba, there's the Amazon Go that someone spoke about yesterday, really advanced, where you can just, Amazon Go, you can walk in, take something off the shelf and walk out, it charges it to your app. I think that's more of a concept type thing rather than a profitable type store, because the technology to set that up is huge in terms of building scanners, cameras in all the shelves, everything to make it work. But it's quite a nice gimmick. But on a lesser gimmick level, the Hema stores in China, it's all app-based. You scan what you want, and they can actually have it delivered to you. So from a South African perspective, where we have huge unemployment, which was really been a big topic lately, we don't necessarily want to automate all our stores, because what does that do for jobs in the sector? But the point is, it doesn't have to cost jobs. It can actually create jobs. What you can do is, instead of moving people from point of sale, or checkouts, as I say, you can actually have them moving through the stores, helping people, helping them with their app, helping them load it, building relationships with customers. Then the question is, well, why do it? It's expensive to put all this technology in. You're not saving any money in terms of cost savings, so why do it? The key thing with that is the data. Imagine you knew everything about everyone that walks into your store, that you can start pushing special offers to them, special coupons, keep bringing them back. And that is what's being missed. And I think the only company doing it in South Africa is Yappy Chef, where you can scan things, QR codes, and get more product information. But that's very premium. And you can understand why they're doing it, because they don't have a huge staff anyway, so it's not going to get the trade union pushback. But the major retailers should still be doing it anyway without costing jobs. Imagine someone who doesn't necessarily have a car, who can't carry lots of shopping bags, they can just walk through a store, scan what they want, and walk out. An hour later, have it delivered to them. That's actually creating jobs, not taking away jobs. And there's a huge convenience thing there, and maybe that's an opportunity for the entrepreneurs in the room. If the big retailers aren't going to do it, why not create an app, install it in the stores for free, where people can scan, and arrange a delivery to have it taken, or you facilitate the whole checkout process. Don't charge the retailers for it, but you keep the data, because data's gold, and you can use that and really monetize it quite massively. So there's an idea for someone. Speak to me if you want to take it forward. But yeah, so it is very much a case of moving from a desktop space into the stores, but then automizing it through apps. So the next big thing that we're seeing coming is the whole concept of visual and voice search. So what we're seeing is there's not really a common interface anymore in terms of search. It was a case of everyone used desktops, then it was smartphones, but now your TV is a smart TV. Your TV is actually a digital thing. Your car is a smart car, in terms of the data. People are talking to their watches. Computer devices are everywhere, so search is changing. Fridges are becoming automated and digitized. The really advanced ones will tell you what's in your fridge and what the expiry dates are and all of that. And then the way people engage with digital, with these different devices, isn't a manual way, and it's not about just typing into a device in terms of what you want. It's very much about speaking. It's video, it's imagery, and obviously there's traditional search. But what this does is it changes the way people behave, and it needs to change the way marketers engage with people. From a visual perspective, Instagram has a really advanced algorithm that can scan millions of images and actually identify them and cluster them based on which images are getting the best engagements. So the other big thing is with voice, from a search perspective, you need to think about it very differently, especially from an SEO perspective. Not that I'm an SEO expert, but the sort of things you need to consider is what normally helps you rank organically is actually going to be different from a voice perspective. You have to be fast in terms of ranking. If people ask something to Siri or start speaking to Alexa, you have to have a quick load time. Otherwise, you're not going to get that result. you need to think about the way people speak versus the way people type. If I type Google Thai restaurants, Bryanston Thai restaurants, that's how I type, because I'm in a rush and I don't need to talk too much. Or I might go, I'm looking for a restaurant in Bryanston that serves Thai food. That's how I talk, and they're very different. And you need to think about that in terms of how you optimize your sites. And by doing that now, you're going to get ahead of the curve, because voice search is growing massively, especially the youth, the under 30s. They're just constantly, I don't know if voice notes is quite a big thing on WhatsApp, but people are speaking much more to their devices than actually typing. Featured content is another thing. You don't want to send back on search results big, long essays. So have snippets that answer questions, and that helps the search return responses and return feedback back to people. And more and more searches are becoming localized. People are always searching for stuff around their area. Yeah?
Okay, so one of the global trends around voice search, it's picked up as one of the kind of the faster growing trends. But I've always wondered what is the impact of that on the South African market? So can you just elaborate a little bit more about that in South Africa?
Yeah. I don't have the exact stat, but it is the fastest growing area within search. I did see a stat recently, but I can't say it offhand, but it is massive, and it is something that you need to be taking seriously, especially, and the stats are that the bulk of it is the under 29 age group, but it is actually happening sort of 30s to 40s as well, at a lesser extent. But it is becoming quite a mainstream way of behavior, and I think it kind of makes obvious sense that it would grow, because devices are becoming so much smarter in terms of how you engage with your car now. If you've got a very new car, a lot of it your phone just syncs with it, so you don't need to actually do much. You can just talk as you go. So it is becoming a big thing. The Alexa devices in people's house, people having them in their home. I think it's still relatively small, but one thing we know about digital from experience is when it starts to take off, it takes off fast. So I wouldn't say it's there now, and it's not massive now, but it definitely, in the future, and the future in digital is a year from now, it could be really big. If you just look back 2 years in terms of how we were behaving compared to now, things are moving so rapidly. So I think it's worth staying ahead of the curve and thinking about stuff now, even if it's not big now. So the data power brokers. This is a terminology, GAFA, that's been used a lot in international. Amazon's not that big for us in this market at this stage. It's still very dominated by, say, Takealot. What's probably missing from this would be Netflix, and I think that also needs to be taken into account. But these are the big power brokers today. They have all the data, and they're within their ecosystems. But apart from being the biggest power brokers and the biggest owners of data, if anyone can answer this, I'd be interested to hear what people's thoughts are. What else do these four, including Netflix, have in common? Any ideas? They're data-driven, yeah? It's a bit of a tough question, but every single one of these you have to log in and opt in. They're closed environments, they're closed ecosystems. So how do you regulate that? So the question is, now Europe has gone and done the GDPR. There's been the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal, and out of that, Facebook did acknowledge some blame just to make it go away, and they were hit with a $500,000 fine. That's what Facebook had to pay out of the Cambridge Analytica. That is less than a daily catering bill, I'm willing to bet. It is nothing to Facebook. But the thing is, this regulation really doesn't hurt them or affect them. What happened with Cambridge Analytica, I don't know how familiar you are with the story, but I don't know if on Facebook you see those survey type things that you do that rate your personality and give you certain scores. They ran those across certain markets in the UK and the US. People do these personality tests and share them. Because that app plugged into Facebook, they were able to capture all the data of those people that do those tests, but they were also able to then capture the data of all your friends who weren't opted in. And that was a glitch in the Facebook system, which is really what the big scandal was. And they then used that they were the agency that ran the Brexit campaign, and they also ran a political campaign in the US. And they were very, very effective by mining the data and manipulating people around those biases because they knew everything about you. So that's been closed up now, but now you have these walled gardens, and Facebook got off that pretty much scot-free. Whereas the other sites, they have to now manage the GDPR. They're the ones going to be affected, because if they put a Facebook tag on their site, Facebook hasn't got any control over that. They can't be held accountable. Neither can Google or Amazon, being the biggest search engine for retail in the world now. So they're actually operating within these walled gardens, and they're totally protected. GDPR actually helps them. And how do you actually, as a user, protect yourself against that? And that's, that's the real challenge, is you can't actually get off these platforms. People say, I don't use Facebook, I don't use Instagram because they're spying on me. They're spying on you anyway. Everywhere you go, they're tracking you. You go onto a booking site, you go onto an airline site, anything you do now, just check the back end of the site. There's certain apps that let you see what cookies are on the back or what tags are linked to a site. I guarantee you'll find a Facebook tag or a Google tag or a double-click tag on almost any site you go to that is doing any kind of marketing for themselves. So I mean, it's just you've got to trust these companies, and they have so much power with all this data. Okay, so in summary, the key thing out of this is AI is driving smart bidding, okay, and with that, creative. The important point out of that as a marketer is don't try and beat the algorithm. A lot of people say to us, I can actually do better by manual bidding than what the algorithm can do. And that's because I almost think they're fighting it and they're trying to justify their worth. So it really is a case of just sort of accepting smart bidding's here, it's not going anywhere. Machines are deciding what to show who, and embrace it. Don't try and hide from it. Smart campaigns also allow for more personal messaging. So that redefines the funnel a lot, because you don't have to just think, this is my awareness campaign, then I'm going to do engagements, then I'm going to do more of a purchase intent campaign, then I'm going to drive conversions, and then I'm going to do a CRM thing to build loyalty. It's a lot more, it's not as clean cut as that, and it's not as simple as that. But in the past, you had to kind of go with that, because there's no ways you could create a marketing strategy for everyone. But now what you can do, everything that's on your website can be fed into these tools and spat out pretty much in the most relevant way to the most relevant person at the moment in time they're looking for it. So make it really personal. Personalization does add complexity in terms of the traditional funnel, but you don't have to worry too much about that complexity. It's dealt with for you. Big data is getting bigger. So offline going online. And this is really a global trend that we are totally missing in South Africa, and something that I think is a big opportunity that we're missing. Voice and visual search, they're obviously also key drivers of data, because you're getting more and more from people. The more they talk to their devices, the more you're learning about them. The more they're searching with images and loading pictures and putting everything on the cloud, the more that data is being aggregated and used. Discovery ads as well. That's also, the more people engage with discovery ads, the more data that's being gathered. And then the last point, which is kind of the point that's the most scary one, because digital has taken off so fast. Facebook's taken off so fast. All this big data has taken off so fast. Legislation doesn't move quickly. It hasn't been able to keep up, and it's not going to keep up. Things are evolving so quickly that the law actually can't follow it. They're trying now, and they're trying to get it right, but essentially, all that is doing is strengthening the big data power brokers in the market, because they have walled-in gardens. You've opted into their terms and conditions, which means they can do anything they want with the data they gather. And they have a monopoly on that data. It's actually making it a lot harder for you as a blogger with your website to start gathering information on people. You're the one that is now responsible for making sure people know that you've got a Facebook tag on there, or that you've got a Google tag on there. It's not necessarily Facebook or Google's problem, but they're the ones getting the data, and they're the ones using it. So thanks very much. Yeah, that's me. Do you have any questions? Yeah. Yeah.
You spoke about machine learning. One thing that interests me is chatbots. I don't know how it affects machine learning side of things. Especially, I don't know if you have any insights or answers to this. A very specific question then also to it is, do you announce that you're a chatbot, or do you rather, because you spoke about personalization as well,
Yeah.
or do you try and pretend that, the bot is actually a person, so to speak? So I don't know how that affects.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure exactly. I mean, I think it is, for me, it's generally quite obvious that it's a bot, but maybe not to everyone. From a law perspective, I think it has to kind of, I don't actually know if you have to necessarily announce it there's a bot, because I don't think that really matters, whether you're giving the information to a real person or to a bot. But it is also obviously an area where you're learning more about people and learning more about what they want, and how that's being aggregated is, it's not really an area that I've got a lot of experience with, but it is something that I think is definitely a space to watch, because it is obviously pulling in data. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else? Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks.